Hi guys, I'm Stephen and welcome to Audio Nautica. Today I want to talk about speakers. One of the things you might have noticed in the hi-fi world, especially amongst audiophiles, is a lot of generalizations can be made, and people can be very passionate about these generalizations. And generalizations have problems. And so I want to talk about a generalization that you hear sometimes with respect to speakers. So I would suspect that most of us are not using speakers in a professional capacity, as in like a recording studio environment. We're using them in a home environment and we listen to them for enjoyment. That's certainly what I use mine for. But a generalization that you'll hear is that you should not use monitors, or certainly that you should not use studio monitors in a hi-fi environment. I'm going to discuss a few of the problems with that generalization today, because certainly when we look at the speakers that I use in my various systems, most of them are in fact monitors. But we'll see in our discussion one of the reasons why precision of terminology is so important. Because when we talk about monitors, we're actually talking about two things. We're talking about a general term of a monitor, and then we're also talking about a studio monitors, and they're not the same thing. And then we talk about general kind of hi-fi speakers themselves. So let's look at the generalization first. The generalization is that we listen to music for enjoyment. Well, I hope so anyway, I do. But that hi-fi speakers are specifically designed for a home environment, and they're designed to make music sound good so that we enjoy it. Okay, that's great, that's good, fantastic. The premise of a monitor is that it's not so much geared towards making the music as enjoyable as it can be, but that it's geared to accuracy of reproduction. And this is especially important in studio monitors. The premise is that studio monitors are used by recording engineers or musicians or whoever it is working in the studio to actually listen to the recording, and they want to know accurately what the recording sounds like. So studio monitors especially are advertised as for doing this. And the other thing about studio monitors is often they are intended to be used in near field. So you think of a mixing desk that might have a couple of studio monitors sitting on top of the mixing desk. They're sitting, within a meter or less of the recording engineer, and they're intended to be used at that distance. Whereas most of us, for home use, we have our speakers much further away. We're not listening to them in near field. So that's the general assumptions, I guess, that are made in this generalization. And now I just want to discuss that in a little bit more detail as to why I don't necessarily agree. And I think the best way to show why I don't necessarily agree is to actually look at my speakers. Because when I look at these speakers, most of these speakers are monitors, and some of them are studio monitors. And we'll see that the generalization doesn't actually hold. Now, I enjoy listening to all of these speakers. I use them for different various applications. I'm using them in a home setting. I'm using them to listen to music and enjoy that music. And I enjoy all of them. So let's just work through those and have a look at them now. So the first one, up on the top left there, is my Yamaha NS10MX. Now this is a studio monitor. It is intended for near field use. And yes, I would agree, this is one speaker that you probably don't want to be using for hi-fi use, because if you watch my other video about the NS10MX, you'll see that it has particularly unique qualities in its sound. It has kind of like a hump at certain frequencies, which forces the recording engineer to pay attention to certain frequencies. So it's not actually accurate in terms of its reproduction. but it is very revealing in terms of the quality of the mix. So if you have a mix that has got problems with lots of hiss or problems with S's in vocals or so on, this speaker will really, it'll belt you around the head with those and force you to fix it, so that when it does go onto someone's home system, it'll sound really good. So yes, this particular speaker is an example of a studio monitor that you wouldn't really want to be using in a home setting. I use these as my computer speakers, so I'm not using them to listen for enjoyment. I'm using them as a near-field monitor, which is what they are. But then if we move to the right to the biggest speaker in this pile, this also is a studio monitor. And we find immediately that the generalization comes crashing down, because these are the best speakers that I own. These are my favorite speakers. I use these for HiFi on my best system. They are a studio monitor. I'm not using them in near field. They're not intended to be used in near field. They're for much larger scale monitoring applications. But they sound absolutely fantastic. And there basically was kind of like a home version of this speaker, as there were for many of the professional JBL speakers. So we find that with this particular speaker, the JBL 4333A, the generalization that a studio monitor is no good for home applications, it's just not true. If we go back to the left and we look at the speaker on the bottom, this is my homemade board-on, called a board-on because it's made out of a pipe from a pipe organ, a board-on pipe. And yes, it is a homebrew speaker, so it's intended to be a hi-fi speaker, and I enjoy listening to that. If we move over to the right-hand side, we have my Polk RT10s. Now, this is a reference speaker, home theater reference speaker. Marketing term I know. It probably, I guess, is another way of saying that it's sort of like is a monitor speaker. When I bought these speakers back in 1997, all the marketing hype was about faithfulness to the recording mix. That's what people wanted. And good home theater systems claimed to faithfully reproduce the audio mix. Well, that sounds like the claim that a monitor speaker makes as well, isn't it? So even though it's not called a monitor, it's called a reference speaker. So it kind of fits into that mold. The speaker to the right at the top is a Polk mini monitor. So again, it's a monitor. It's not a studio monitor. It is intended for home use, but it claims to be a monitor. And then the speaker underneath it, Rogers compact monitor. It also is a monitor. It's not intended for studio use per se, but it draws from the line of Rogers monitor speakers that were intended for studio use, such as the famous Rogers LS3/5A, which was designed to go in the back of outside broadcast fans, but people loved the way it sounded so much that it became extremely popular in homes. So once again, we find that the generalization falls down, this idea that you can't enjoy a studio monitor in the home because it's not intended for home use. Another reason why the generalization falls down, in my opinion, is because at the end of the day, we listen to speakers because we like the way that they sound. You will have noticed that most of these speakers in this pile are monitors, but they all sound very different. If they didn't sound different, if they all sounded the same, well, I wouldn't have them all. I like them all, and I like their different sound qualities. So, for example, the Rogers, it's a monitor. It has a very British kind of a sound. It's very mellow. Whereas the Polk Audio mini monitors above them, they sound completely different, and of course they're going to, because they're a much smaller speaker. They have a much cleaner kind of a sound. It's not a British sound, so it sounds very different. Likewise, the Yamaha NS10 MXs, they're a little bit larger than the Polk mini monitors, but they also have a very different sound. And then, of course, as one would expect, these enormous JBL 4333As, Well, they have a completely different sound as well. They've got a 15-inch woofer in them. They've got ribbon tweeters. So they have a magnificent sound. Here's a bunch of speakers that are all monitors, yet they have very, very different sounds. So I would simply say, instead of fussing over whether a speaker claims to be a monitor or a studio monitor or whatever it is, I would say just get speakers that you like. The only way you can find out is listen to them, ideally in your home where you're going to be listening to them, and listen to what they sound like. And after you've done that for a while, you'll know whether you like them or not. If you don't like them, get rid of them. If you do like them, keep them. Simple as that. I really hope this video has been useful and you enjoyed it. Please give me a like, subscribe and share. I've got a Patreon if you want to support my work, patreon.com/Audionautica, and I really look forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye for now.